In modern times, many acts of violence and terrorism have been carried out in the name of religious causes. The terrorists who launched the attacks of September 11, 2001 claimed to act in the cause of Islam, as they understood it. But here's a question. How far can such acts be blamed on Holy Scriptures? Does any scripture, such as the Qur'an, have violence built into it or into the religion based on it? If you're looking for violent texts in the Qur'an, you can find them. Verse 9:5, for instance, is the sword verse, and it urges believers to pursue and attack unbelievers, or at least until they give up their unbelief. After terror attack, you can usually find so-called experts explaining that violence and terrorism are sometimes hardwired into Islam, and they'll always quote that same range of military-sounding verses. Some campaigners even demand that Muslims purge the Qur'an of such verses, which they see as dangerous in and of themselves. They want them to rewrite their holiest scripture. But here's the problem. The Bible too has many verses that are at least as violent and as outright frightening as something like the sword verse. Very rarely do those same media experts treat the two scriptures in anything like the same balanced way. In my book, Laying Down the Sword, I describe the violent texts that we find in the Hebrew Bible, which Christians know as the Old Testament. They come in various categories. The Bible was written at a time of warring tribes and kingdoms, so it's only natural that the books would describe acts of violence and massacre. If they didn't, they'd be failing to describe social reality. But there's a special category of verses that really cries out for attention. In these texts, which are especially found in the earliest historical books, the Bible describes God actively commanding the killing of whole peoples on the grounds of their race or ethnicity. In the book of Deuteronomy, God tells his people how they must act when they enter the Holy Land and where they meet the peoples who already live there. When the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you've defeated them, then you must destroy them totally, make no treaty with them, and show them no mercy. You must destroy all the peoples the Lord your God gives over to you. Other verses make clear that this destruction was to be absolute, extending to their men, women, children, and even animals. In one story, God condemns King Saul when he fails to carry out this horrible order against one particular people, the Amalekites. In these verses, God commands outright genocide. It's worth saying that we are not just dealing here with different ways of warfare that were common in a primitive or ancient society. Even in the ancient world, this kind of fighting, of total annihilation, was extremely rare. Through the centuries, Jews and Christians have often struggled to reconcile those passages with the truths of their own religions, which present such utterly different teachings of love and respect for human life. Normally, they get around the passages by reading them as allegories. Why, yes, one thinker might say, of course we have to destroy some enemy, but it's not meant to be a real people, it's a metaphor for sin or lust, and we must root it out. But that's not what the texts actually say. Throughout Christian history, believers have used these violent Bible passages, these texts of terror, to justify acts of extreme violence and genocide against enemies. Protestants use these verses against Catholics and vice versa. The medieval church used the same verses to justify the wars of the Crusades. The same verses were used to justify the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. What I'm not saying here is that the Bible is more violent than the Qur'an or vice versa. Rather, each scripture has troubling passages, and normally believers get around them by ignoring them. However, extremists too often rely on these problematic verses to the exclusion of many other verses that mitigate or qualify those teachings. Neither the Bible nor the Qur'an is violent of its nature, nor is Islam, nor Judaism, nor Christianity. The problem lies with individual believers in each tradition. In each case, different believers at particular times and places cite scripture to justify terrorist and criminal acts, and in so doing, they bring those sacred writings into disrepute. I'm Philip Jenkins for the Emir-Stein Center.
If you want to see more content like this, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new videos.